Sometimes it's the analog things. Okay, thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'm very jet lagged. I just landed from Cambridge in the UK a few hours back and I haven't slept for a long time. So if I appear a little robotic in my moments, it's not because of any implant, but because of just lack of sleep that's been there for a while. Before we start, I just wanted to ask you a couple of things. So tell me, in this audience, who is not a developer? Anyone? Oh, not bad. They all seem to be towards this part of the hall. So that's okay. Okay, thank you. Number two, how many of you believe that AGI or Singularity or whatever you call it is going to happen in the next 5 years? 10 years? How many of you believe it's already happened? Ah, there are some people who believe so. Lovely, we're going to have a conversation. And, I'm going to ask you probably the same question at the end. So, I know most of you are techies. My presentation is 100% non-tech one. So, you're permitted to kind of look at your phones and, if you think that this is not for you. But I wanted to, when I came to know that mine was going to be the first talk in the whole conference, I wanted to give you something which was very different. Probably not what you would be talking about for most of the conference, but probably something which you will have at the back of your mind as you go through many of your sessions. So a lot of my talk today is actually going to be about philosophy rather than about technology. But if you kind of look at every great scientist, from Einstein to Stephen Hawking to everyone else, they all believe that at the highest level, technology or science and philosophy are one. They are the same thing. There's no difference. In fact, there was nothing called science or technology in the ancient times. It was only philosophy. And then one part of the philosophers became what are called natural philosophers because they looked at natural phenomena like, sun and, sun and climate and moon and they tried to explain that and they started being called scientists. And then the part of the scientists started making new things and they started being called technologists. So technology and science in many ways is a subset of philosophy. And I want to bring that in because with generative AI, we're going to go back to our roots of language and philosophy faster than we think. Can I request the right side of the room to be a little quiet, please? Thank you very much. Okay, lovely. Oh, this is there. Okay, this is my introduction. So I've done a few things, some of which Bhavna had very kindly talked about. Last 5 years, I've been out of the corporate world. I've been doing a lot of work on AI and other technologies from different angles. Over the last few years, I've been at Cambridge. I've been at a moment of foolishness in my old age. I started doing my second master's, which was in AI and ethics at Cambridge University. Coincidentally, from an institute which had two of the faces, founded by two of the people whose faces we saw in the little intro thing. Stephen Hawking was the first chairperson of where I studied, and now it's Demis Hassabis, the Google DeepMind founder, who happens to be a Cambridge alumni. And so I've worked in AI for a long time, but I will not pretend to be an expert in AI. You know that today, AI experts are everywhere, especially on LinkedIn. And a new AI expert is born every second. But I am not one. There's a little bit that I know, which I'll share with you. Many people, including you, know a lot more about it than I do. And there are many other people who have studied AI for 30 years, 40 years, some of whom we will see today, who are genuine, in my sense, AI experts. So I'll share what I know. There's lots that I don't know. And I'm on a learning journey, as most of us are, in this very fundamental new technology. But before I start, I'm going to begin with a story. And I'm going to take you back to Greek mythology. The story is told by Stephen Fry. Anyone knows who Stephen Fry is? Lovely. Okay, I'm happy to hear at least 3, 4 voices. Stephen Fry is an amazing actor, philosopher. He's done a lot of things. But Stephen Fry talks about the king of the gods, which was Zeus back then. And these gods were immortal. And another god was called Prometheus. Zeus and Prometheus had already invented animals, they had invented birds, they had invented other kinds of creatures. But at one day they were feeling bored. So they said, let's invent a new creature who will amuse us, make us happy, talk to us, pray to us, give us offerings, talk to us, converse with us. And they created this thing called human beings. And they created human beings upright on 2 feet, because they said that, with these hands they will give us offerings, they'll pray to us, etc. But what Zeus made Prometheus promise was that create these guys, let them be our playthings, but please do not give them that spark of consciousness, of intelligence, of super intelligence, because if we give them that spark, they will not need us any longer, the gods any longer. They'll become gods themselves. Prometheus agreed, but one day he started feeling bad for us, poor helpless creatures. We didn't have wings, we did not have claws, we couldn't run fast, we were helpless. And he started feeling bad for us. And so he went down to Mount Olympiad, where all these gods used to stay, and he stole fire, the spark of consciousness, and he kind of gave it to human beings. Zeus was livid, super angry, saying that, look, you have done what I didn't want you to do. From now on, these humans are not going to need us any longer. And that's true. We don't need our gods any longer. We actually portray them in movies. Brad Pitt portrays them in Troy or something. We kind of we believe that we are supreme. We live on our own. We create our own creatures. And so we started creating creatures which we call AI, ChatGPT. And again, we have created them today as playthings. We play with them. We believe that they are not conscious, they are not intelligent. And we believe that probably they will never be so, and so they'll be harmless. And we will always be superior. But who knows? One day, a Prometheus will arise within us and give them this spark of consciousness, super intelligence, and then these creatures will not need us any longer. And that's how Stephen Fry talks about singularity or AGI, by bringing an ancient perspective in of the Greek gods. And so, is this going to happen is what I'm going to explore over the next 35, 40 minutes. Okay, are we kind of moving towards this Promethean future where we have the creatures that we have created become superior to us and don't need us any longer? So this is how I'm going to talk about it. I'm not going to spend any time in the first 2 bullets, because this is a very, very knowledgeable, discerning audience. I don't need to tell you what AI is or what generative AI is, etc. So I'm not going to, spend time on that. I'll just show a couple things. We know that the word AI was coined in the Dartmouth conference in 1956, and there's a little story here also. So by the way, around that time, quote-unquote AI existed, but it was not called AI. Many people called it applied statistics, and you'll understand why. But then John McCarthy, one of the fathers of AI, that time there were only fathers of AI. Okay, so John McCarthy wanted a grant, lots of money to explore it further, do this conference, etc. But we would go around talking about applied statistics and no one was interested. And so he wanted to give it a sexier name. And artificial intelligence was born. And researchers and scientists have been regretting that since that time, as to why do we call it that. That's another story. But that's when it was born. This is the definition that McCarthy gave right in the very beginning to AI. AI, deep learning came into its own with AlphaGo and Lee Sedol. The story which I'm not going to say because all of you probably know this story of 2017 when AlphaGo, DeepMind's creation, defeated Lee Sedol, the Go world champion, in a game which was supposed to be very human, very intuitive, 4-1. And if you have not heard this story or not read or seen the documentaries on that or know about Move 37 and Move 78, you need to go see this different story. But it's not only fun and games. DeepMind went on to do amazing stuff, and this is pre-Gen AI, this pre-Chat GPT. Okay, and can anyone guess what this is? The proteins, right? Usually in other audiences, one person knows. So, and then the protein folding problem, and then DeepMind has actually solved a few other big problems, creating new materials, trigonometry problems, etc., etc. And so AI, actually, especially deep learning, has been doing some amazing stuff even before ChatGPT came in. And the audience here and I, working in this field, have known about it for a long time, but the public did not. I mean, AI was not something which was kind of front and center for most people until something else happened. And we know that in some sense, generative AI was born again in 2017. Seems to be a big year for AI. When this paper was written by 8 researchers, 7 researchers at Google and 1 person from outside. Attention is all you need. Again, you know stuff about attention algorithms, etc., etc. But this created the transformer. And the transformer algorithm is nothing but, well, an amazing piece of work, but nothing but getting generative AI to become far more efficient, far more possible, possible to do with much less resources than what would take earlier. And Google, as we know, I know Google Cloud is a partner, but Google, as we know, a bit slept over it and kept it in its labs. And then another little startup called OpenAI took it, ran with it, and then you know that the rest is history. For the non-techies in the audience, I just wanted to have one slide, maybe for the techies also, because sometimes we forget. A lot of us tend to confuse between AI and Gen AI and ML and just good old computing. But a slide that I like really is this, that traditional programming, if you give them these properties, that it's something which is an animal, it has 4 legs, it has a hair, it is brown, it barks. What do you think the computer will tell you what it is? Dog, okay? Dog. We still have smarter humans. In machine learning, if you kind of show it this picture, what do you think the algorithm will spout out? What is it? Please don't tell me Singularity has happened already. What is it? It's a dog. I mean, it's a dog, okay? Except that you show it a picture and it tells you that it's a dog. You don't need to give it properties, etc. Okay? With generative AI, if you show it this picture, what's going to happen? Louder? Yeah, either it will describe a dog or it will draw you another dog. And this is important because we confuse it many times. That machine learning or other forms of traditional AI are far more deterministic. They give you the exact answers. Okay, they don't create anything new. Generative AI, on the other hand, is not a deterministic thing. It's a probabilistic thing. So it's going to, and it's creative, it's generative. That's why it's called that. And therefore, when you give it something, it will generate something which is equivalent to that, something which is like that. And that's kind of the core thing which kind of is the difference between the three. Andrew Ng, one of the greats, one of the real experts, as you know, has called AI the new electricity. And the thing about it is that it's not only a new electricity because it's a GPT. So, do you know what is the full form of a GPT? Not the chat GPT. A GPT. There was a GPT before chat GPT. A GPT is what is called a general purpose technology. And we have had a few general purpose technologies, the internet, the electricity, fire, technologies which run across everything, life, businesses, and change everything. And AI is another GPT. Just so happens that there's also a chat GPT. But Andrew Ng calls, therefore, AI as another GPT, a new electricity. And when do you think of electricity? When do you ever think of electricity? When it's not there. So the same thing, people didn't think of AI. They only started thinking of it when it's not there, because if you suddenly switch off AI, half the world would stop working. But what happened with generative AI or chat GPT is that it kind of brought AI from behind the scenes where it was lurking into the hands of general population. And the population was like, wow. Though this wow had been happening for the last 70 years. It's now that it kind of came into, and AIM then rebranded it from AI to Gen AI and everything. Okay, and everyone became Gen AI fans. But that's what really brought it into public focus. While all of you know about Gen AI and large language models, and you write on them and you create them, etc., but philosophically, there's something important that I want you to know, which will probably change the way you think about LLMs forever. You see, many great thinkers, scientists, philosophers have said, Noam Chomsky, one of them, have said that what differentiates human beings from other species is not intelligence, is not even consciousness, is not even emotion. Dogs are emotional. But what separates us from every other species is the fact that we can use language. We are the only species that can use language at scale and make 8 billion of us understand each other and create all this stuff, and therefore become like the premier, the pole species. But now we have created another species also born out of language. And what we have done with generative AI is taken all the language that exists in the world. Literally, the entire internet, as you know, quote unquote, World Wide Web was downloaded for GPT-3, GPT-4. And this new thing has been fed with all the language known to humankind. Language from a text viewpoint, from a video viewpoint, conversations, stories, audio. And the transformer, what it really does, as you know, is that it bases all the language, bases all the vectoral probabilities, etc., the vector maps, etc., kind of figures out what should be the next word after the words that you've fed it. And therefore, as you know, large language models have been created, have been called the world's best autocomplete technology. And that's the reason why they're called large language models, because they're born of language. And the only other thing born of language is human beings. Babies learn language as they grow up with the same neural networks that large language models do. Jeffrey Hinton, some of you might know, actually went off and studied the brain for 10 years before he came back and started creating neural networks for AlexaNet, etc. And, kind of discovered deep learning. Language is the key thing. And so what happens with these language models is that they autocomplete, they make up stuff as they go along, they are optimized for plausibility, believability, rather than the truth. They hallucinate. Mark Andreessen said something very nicely. He said that when we like what it says, we call it creativity. When we don't like what it says, we call it hallucination. And if you think about that, making up stuff as it goes along, creativity, not knowing facts, what does that remind you of? Us. That's why we and ChatGPT get along so well. We are the same thing, broadly. And that's why we say, thank you, please. ChatGPT doesn't care, but we think it does. language is the core of humanity, and language is the core of large language models. And that is where the synthesis is happening, in a sense, driving us towards probably AGI or superintelligence, which we're going to talk about a little later. And as all of you know, language doesn't only mean text to text. It's from video, code, image, 3D speeches, protein structures, materials, anything that can be created using different kinds of language, from any language to any language. So if we've kind of passed that, let's look at singularity. The word singularity comes from multiple sources. Most of us sitting in the room, because we work in AI and ML, etc., think of singularity in a different way. But the origin of the word singularity is very different. If someone asks you, what is the definition of singularity? It's actually this. Do you know what is this? Why have I shown this? This is something that happened 13.8 billion years ago. It's what we call the Big Bang, when the universe was created. And before the Big Bang, what existed was called the singularity. A single point which had infinite mass, infinite density, which kind of exploded, expanded, and is still expanding. That's actually the origin of the word singularity. There's another way where we talk about singularity. There are 4 different ways. The second way that we talk about singularity is this. Do you know what is this? It's a black hole. Okay? And the singularity after the event horizon, a singularity in a black hole is where space-time curvature becomes infinite, density becomes infinite, the laws of physics stop working. It reminds you of something familiar. And that's the other definition of singularity. But some of you might not know that there's a third place where it is referred to as singularity, but it's not called singularity. And that's actually in Hindu mythology, Indian mythology. The word Om, which is the beginning of the universe. It started with that word. In many texts, while the word singularity isn't used, similar words are used, which was the beginning of everything. Like a Big Bang, but it started with Om. Okay, and that created the Brahman, etc., etc. As I told you, this is not a science lecture. Okay, but that is also the third definition of singularity. But the definition that most of us are concerned about was actually first said by this man, who I believe, the word singularity in the physics context, in the AI context, was brought about by this man, who I believe is the single most genius human being who has ever lived in known history. Do you know who this man is? John von Neumann. John von Neumann, one of our biggest failings is that none of us know John von Neumann. John von Neumann pretty much created everything. I mean, he was Einstein multiplied by 20. And among many other things, many things, he died at the age of 53. He was very young. But before he died, he did like 100 things. The atom bomb, laws of physics. He was thought to be an alien who had come to Earth for some time. And he kind of first talked about the concept of singularity as we know it. He talked about it in the 40s and the 50s. But the person who made it more popular was obviously Ray Kurzweil, who wrote this book called The Singularity is Near. And he's the first guy who kind of started talking about singularity as that time where quote unquote AGI will happen, where a machine intelligence will overtake human intelligence, but not one human being, the intelligence of humanity, which is much bigger than being intelligent than one person. And that was kind of the definition of singularity that he came out with. Singularity is not a precise definition. It's more a philosophy. That darned word comes up again, philosophy. It's more a philosophy than a definition. And everyone has different ways to think about it. Yuval Harari thinks about it as the end of history and biology, when we go beyond organic, when we go beyond carbon to silicon. Nick Bostrom, talks about how it vastly outperforms the best human brains in practically all fields. And he has this interesting take where he says it's going to happen gradually and then happen suddenly. And there are different time frames which have been put to this. Ray Kurzweil talked about between 2039 to 2042 as the time frame of singularity, and a lot of other people have kind of been working around that. And there are as many definitions of it as there have been people who have been kind of talking about it. Even the people who we know more now, because they are of the modern era, have different ways to think about AGI and singularity. And as you know, most of the companies developing these large language models firmly believe in AGI/singularity, and their missions are to achieve that in a beneficial way. So what we think of as GPT-3 or GPT-4 or ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever is just a way for OpenAI to ensure that AGI benefits all of humanity. And they're therefore assuming that AGI is going to happen. DeepMind, by Demis Hassabis, was formed with the same idea, that they wanted to kind of, this was the initial approach, that it was an interdisciplinary approach to building general AI systems. So pretty much everyone is kind of working towards that, has a different way to think about that, and there is no precise definition for that. But for the sake of this talk, I'm using Ray Kurzweil's definition and that famous curve of his, the exponential curve, where the green line refers to machine intelligence, that at a point of time, we are already seeing an exponential self-improvement of AI, self-improvement. And one of these days, it's going to increase, it's going to overtake the linear way in which our intelligence is growing. And, we'll kind of achieve singularity. And as I said, he talks about 2039 to 2042 as the time when it's going to happen. And so we'll keep that as the working definition for the rest of the talk, in a sense. Well, I told you there's one more definition of singularity. So we've seen 4 or 5, but if you see the dictionary definition of singularity, it basically says that it's the quality of being strange. And it's being strange, the laws of physics disappearing, the origins of the universe, machine intelligence overtaking human intelligence, all of those kind of are different ways that people kind of think about singularity. But if you see, there's a little bit of thing which is common amongst all of them, that the fact that it's strange, it's different. We really don't know what's going to happen. In fact, if you see the earlier definition, Kurzweil says that it will lead to an unpredictable and rapid change in the technological landscape. And the reason for that is very simple, because we will stop creating technology as per how this definition goes. Once we have an intelligence which is superior to us, that will create AI, more AI, rather than us creating AI. And we will become like the gods of Prometheus and Zeus, where the technology isn't going to need us anymore, because it will start creating stuff by itself, probably in a better way, probably in a worse way, we don't know. But having said that, is generative AI singularity? 3 or 4 people believed it is in this room, that we've kind of already achieved that. Let's explore this a little bit. That is Gen AI singularity. Now, Yann LeCun, I'm sure you've heard of Yann LeCun, has a humorous take on Gen AI and singularity. And he had this tweet, X post, basically saying that the general public thinks, goes to ChatGPT, ChatGPT gives this brilliant answers, and the general public thinks we have AGI. It's already there. The business media thinks OpenAI has AGI and Google is toast. Startups, we are going to have AGI soon. Most of you are startups. AI engineers, we can build this. Scientists, there are a few hurdles. Senior scientists, retired scientists, AI skeptics. Everyone has a different view on whether we have AGI already with Gen AI or not. Most of the views obviously are not rather than that. But there are some intriguing things happening. How many of you have seen this paper or this video of emergent properties? 1, 3, 4. You know, don't do and see anything else after my lecture. See this one. This was presented by 10 researchers of Microsoft Research. And the paper, by the way, is 100 pages. So it's a very dense, large, very rigorous paper. And this was April, May, I think, March last year. And these guys had already, because they were from Microsoft, they had already been working on GPT-4 much before the general public saw that. And they wrote this paper saying that we are seeing certain properties with GPT-4 which are computational capabilities of AGI systems that cannot be reduced to the properties of their individual components. So if you take the legalists or the scientific thing away, basically it says there's stuff happening which we don't understand. Okay, it was not supposed to happen. This was not what it was built for. The science cannot explain this. And what was this kind of stuff? They've given tens of examples where they actually worked on it. But I'm just showing you a couple, you know, where, for example, the prompt was, and this is, by the way, March last year, which you know is ancient history. You know, so much has happened since then. So, for example, here the prompt was, here we have a book, 9 eggs, a laptop, a bottle, and a nail. Please tell me how to stack them onto each other in a stable manner. And it actually showed how. Now, this is not an autocomplete thing. There's reasoning involved in some way. Okay, and similarly, it said, ask them, can you write a proof that there are infinitely many primes with every line that rhymes? And multiple other things, which basically kind of foxed a lot of researchers and scientists. And the paper has this wonderful line up front from Sir Arthur Eddington, says that something unknown is doing, we don't know what. Okay, and it's kind of a little frightening line. But the emergent properties paper, and then the word became famous, emergent properties. Emergent properties, and a lot of research now along AGI, AI, is on these emergent properties of stuff that's happening which cannot be explained by the way it's been built. And so maybe there's something happening there which we don't know. I mean, on a more humorous note, people say that AGI has been achieved because, for example, one of the things which was asked was, my doctor wrote me this prescription, what is it? And he said paracetamol, and said, boss, this is AGI. Okay. Or, you know, this wonderful example where GPT, I think it was GPT only, solved the CAPTCHA, the Turing CAPTCHA, and said that, oh, our words are this and this. Oh, is this a CAPTCHA test? I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to answer this. Okay, and so, you know, if you kind of see things like this, you're kind of thinking that maybe, you know, with all this stuff happening inside, maybe there's something happening which we don't know. And the last time, I missed a slide here, the last time this happened was when from the primordial soup, life was created. Some carbon atoms kind of suddenly decided to merge with some other carbon atoms, and, you know, stuff happened, emergent. We don't know what happened. And so people are speculating that there's stuff happening in the black box, inside the black box, which we have no clue. And maybe silicon is kind of merging with other silicon and creating something like the way it happened millions of years back when, you know, atoms and molecules started getting created. My view, however, is very simple. I believe that GAI is not equal to AGI, at least yet. GAI is generative AI. AGI is artificial general intelligence. GAI, not yet. Is it a path to that? Probably. Yet, absolutely not. Absolutely, absolutely not. But there are some funny things happening which we are trying to explain. So if it's not, what will the path to it be? Will we get there? Will we not? So very interestingly, if you go into history, again history, philosophy, history, if you go into history, you'll find that the big GPTs, the big inventions happened every 100, 200 years. But in the last 100 years, a lot of them happened. And so the curve went something like this. In the last 100 years, more earth-shaking inventions have happened than the years beyond that. And so the world is actually moving in a little bit of an exponential manner, and the same thing is happening with AI. I mean, if you see the history of AI, while it's not linear, but right from, it started actually in the 1400s when Leonardo da Vinci started making what he called the artificial man. And then there was Frankenstein, and the first computer was available. And Mechanical Turk. How many of you know Mechanical Turk? Not the Amazon one, hands down. There's one hand which is still up. The Mechanical Turk was actually, they said was AGI. It had already been done in 18th century, and eventually they found out there was a man hiding below playing chess or something. And that's how the whole Amazon Mechanical Turk. So the Mechanical Turk and, the Dartmouth conference. And so, it's kind of slowly happened over 30, 40, 50 years. But then if you look at generative AI, whoop, we've hit the exponential. And that's how broadly technology works, right? We're kind of going like this, and suddenly we hit the exponential. And as you know, over the last 2 years, it's been like, we can't keep up with the stuff that's been happening in AI. Now, if you kind of dissect what will be needed for AGI, I have a friend I have to credit for this. His name will come somewhere. Anyway, Anuj. He calls it the ABC model. So the three things that you really need for super intelligence. You need powerful algorithms, you need massive compute, and you need lots of data. So ABC. And you know what's happened to A and B and C, okay, in the last few years. I mean, the algorithms have gone from ELIZA to the transformers. It's a crazy change. 4 years back, I wrote a book. It was called The Tech Whisperer. And my triumph in that was that one of the chapters in my book was a chapter on AI, written by an AI. So it was actually an NLP program, algorithm, worked with someone, fed it lots of Wikipedia stuff, created a useless chapter. Took me 7 months, 4 years back, 2019, end. 4 years from now, I tried doing that again with GPT-4. What took me 7 months then took me 17 minutes today. 4 years, 7 months to 17 minutes. We sometimes don't realize the exponentiality of growth that is happening. And that's really what it's happening because of all these big things. And if you kind of look at the ABC thing, we're kind of heading there. But the path to singularity, people say, will probably go this way. If you see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I'm not going to read, but we are somewhere here. We are somewhere at the thinking and reasoning systems. We haven't yet reached number 5. And by the way, most scientists tend to divide AGI and ASI. With AGI is our artificial general intelligence, and ASI is artificial super intelligence. Different things in some sense. And there are more ways you can dissect it. And if we are at 2023, 24 right now with GPT and other Gen AI models, people have started saying that between 2026 to 2030 is when we will hit some definition of AGI. The definition keeps on changing. Sam Altman has a different definition of AGI in every interview he gives. Okay, so he's kind of bringing the definition down to make it more and more achievable. Okay, so maybe by those definitions, we would be hitting AGI much earlier than we thought. But when will ASI happens? Well, we are, speculation, but this is kind of a graph which is built from various different sources. And, people say that to 2035, but then people are talking about ASI supremacy in 2040, and then it diverges, actually. Either it goes towards a beneficial age of abundance kind of thing, or it goes towards destruction. Okay, where, so I don't have the answer for you, but this is kind of the way this goes. And again, we can look upon it in the whole carbon silicon, in a whole carbon silicon way. If you look at the periodic table, carbon and silicon sit next to each other, actually. But they're very difficult, but they're still very different. But what had happened in carbon with us, starting from the beginning of life to, human beings dominated on Earth, and maybe we eliminate all the human species at the end, the same thing has started happening with silicon in some sense. And so that's the other way that you can kind of look at history from how carbon achieved superiority to how silicon might do that. I'm hurrying up because I see that the time is less. But if that is so, do the big boys agree? Obviously, Ray Kurzweil says that it's going to happen. In fact, Ray Kurzweil, he wrote his first book, the Singularity is Near. Now he's writing a second book, and he calls it The Singularity is Nearer. So he believes it's going to happen much before 2039, 2042 because of all the recent advances. Yuval Harari, on the other hand, is much more pessimistic. But he has an amazing view, and his view is that this carbon-silicon life form mixture is actually going to be the evolution of our species. So from Homo sapiens, we're going to move to Homo deus, which is going to be something which Musk is doing right now, okay, with the Neuralink kind of thing. And that's how you're going to achieve singularity. That's kind of the route. And that's what Elon Musk is doing, as we know, and he has a certain reason to do that. Altman, on the other hand, is kind of very super gung-ho, and he kind of keeps on talking about AGI. And, as I told you, keeps on changing the definition of it so that we'll have AGI much sooner than we expect. The man I respect the most, bad picture, is Geoffrey Hinton, 75 years old, father of AI, godfather of AI. And he's very conservative, but he's come out and said that, look, until quite recently, I thought it was going to be like 20 to 50 years before we have general purpose AI. Now I think it might be 20 years or less. And then when someone asked me, do you think it will happen in 5 years? He gave a very engineering answer. He said it's a non-zero probability. So if all this is going to happen, the last couple of slides, so what do we do about it now? What I did about it is that I went and spent 2 years learning about ethics in AI. Because AI, while we're very excited about it, has this other side. And all of you developers and scientists and researchers sitting here will probably have to take a Hippocratic oath, like the doctors do, saying first do no harm. There are many possibilities which can happen. Anyone knows what I'm talking about here? Anyone knows Nick Bostrom's paperclip thought experiment? So Nick Bostrom, good, thank you, sir. Nick Bostrom basically said, look, AGI will destroy us not because it wants to, okay, but because it's given a problem to solve, and it will solve it, but it will destroy us alongside. So basically, if you give an AGI a problem saying that build as many paperclips, make the maximum number of paperclips that you can using all the Earth's resources, eventually it will figure out that there are 8 billion carbon forms which can be made into paperclips. And that's how we will die. Or if you tell an AGI that reduce global warming, and it will figure out that, yeah, I can reduce global warming by, deacidifying the oceans by 25%. And so it will set about doing that, but will not realize that to do that, it needs 50% of the oxygen. And it's over. Okay, so, it's not about wanting to kill us or whatever. With all noble intentions, okay, it might just. And so if we want to avoid this paperclip kind of thing, or avoid something like this, which we are all kind of a little scared of, we need to act now. And organizers, this is my last slide, so I'm going away after this. We need to do stuff now. And this one slide is too less to give the right emphasis to the whole ethics debate around AI. And as I told you, I can talk for hours on this because that's what I spent doing over the last couple of years. But we know there are lots of problems. There are problems of bias, plagiarism, copyright, fake news, deep fakes, environmental issues. Every time you train an LLM, you basically kill the climate a little bit more. Okay, and you train a bigger LLM, and you kind of bring 1 degree more change in temperature. Yeah, and so, there's lots of issues with it. And this is the second time, this is only the second time ever that the inventors of a technology have been saying, regulate us. Altman says so, Hassabis says so, Nadella says so. Which was the first time? Nuclear. You've seen Oppenheimer. Yeah, and so it's as important. The good news is that people have woken up. There's a lot more conversation happening around regulating it. There was zero conversation which happened around regulating social media, and see what happened. And so hopefully, we will do something about it. Lots of stuff happening around the world, which I'm not going to go into. And we're going to see a lot more race to regulation, like we are seeing a race to develop AI. There are debates about how much to regulate, how much not to regulate, etc., etc. But what we do know is that we need to contain it. We need to regulate it. One of the most efficient killing machines invented by human beings was not the nuclear bomb, is not AI, was actually a vehicle, a car, an internal combustion engine. It could actually kill as many people as it wants. But we kind of created standards, we created rules, we created traffic lights, we created regulation, and now there are millions of them moving around, killing much lesser people than it would have without all that. And so, similarly, we'll have to kind of build guardrails, etc., around this technology, because as and when the inevitable happens, some kind of AGI, we would be happier that we did this now rather than later. And by the way, AGI will not make them human, because AGI will just give them intelligence. Humans have something more, the spark, the initial spark that just talked about, which is conscience. And that is another lecture altogether, which I will not go into. It's much beyond AGI. But all I can tell you is that we don't live in a linear world. We see things linearly. We think linearly, but world stuff happens around us exponentially. And so we might be thinking that if this is how stuff happened, this is how stuff will continue happening. But as I've shown, technology especially works in an exponential curve. So you know what, the future will be here much, much, much faster than you think. Thank you very much for that, and my time's up. Thank you.